Good afternoon, and welcome to the very first Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk of 2023. Woo! Yeah, good crowd. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m. here in the building and live online. So whether you're here in Bristol or far away, you can join in the conversation. My name is Martin O'Leary. I am the studio community lead as of like 5 days ago. I'm a white man in my 30s with long hair and wearing a fetching baby blue jumper that my mum bought me for Christmas. So every Friday we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, where we offer you the chance to spend some time in the space, hot desk alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, an especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio, for whom this may be the first time you're joining us. Identify yourselves if this is your first time here. Loads. Well, big welcome to all of you. The rest of you have probably heard this speech before. I'm sorry, but I'm going to do it anyway. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding, product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, the University of the West of England, and the University of Bristol. And what we do is we offer studio space, including desk space, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And we're a place for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make time for collaboration. Now, quick bit of housekeeping. Do feel free to move around, make a cup of tea, use the kitchen, grab a glass of water, whatever you want. Please don't use the microwave. It messes with all sorts of things. If you need to take a break, there's a quiet space just through this wall here. You go around the corner. Anyone needs to take a break, no problem. There are fire exits at either end of the studio. If you hear a fire alarm, that is real. Follow a member of the studio team, and we will direct you to them. And if you need the toilet, there are accessible toilets and baby change in the corridor just next to the kitchen. There may be a Q&A at the end of the talk, Nikesh. Nikesh wasn't sure. There's going to be a Q&A at the end of the talk. For those of you who are watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. The rest of you will do it old school. Just stick your hand in the air and we'll get to you. You can get news on all of our future talks by going to watershed.co.uk/studio, going to @PMStudioUK on Twitter, @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, @Pervasive Media Studio @mastodon.social on Mastodon if Twitter collapses in the next 5 minutes, or just Google us, you'll find us. But now I would like to introduce our speaker for today. Nikesh Shukla is an author and the editor of the award-winning best-selling essay collection, The Good Immigrant. He's also, as far as I know, the only fellow of the Royal Society of Literature to have written for Spider-Man. And today he'll be talking about imposter syndrome, artistic failure, projects that didn't happen, the ideas that never got finished, and how none of that is bad. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Nikesh.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for letting me know you're out there. How self-aggrandizing to talk about failure. Who am I? So I guess past me is an idiot for suggesting I do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think that's probably the point of this. Just by a show of hands, who in here is here because you make stuff? You're an artist of some sort. You make films or books or pieces of art. Okay, so the majority. This is pitched at you guys, basically. But it's also the pep talk I wish someone would give me in the first week of the year, because the first week of the year I'm usually feeling like, oh, what's the point? I really want to retrain as something useful. But then what's useful? Like, define useful. What is use? And actually, I'm only really good at 2 or 3 things. So this is sort of a pep talk going into the new year that's sort of like reflecting on the last 12 months. Because last year I had a really crap year. I had a really crap year personally and a really crap year professionally. And loads of stuff went wrong. In August of last year, there was one day where I had a big film project that I was so I was waiting for the contract on, and I had a TV show that I was making with Bad Robot with JJ Bloody Abrams. This is streaming on the internet. I shouldn't have said that. Sorry, NDAs that I just broke. And I had a book and in one day, all three of them got knocked back. And I did what I classically do, or what I spiraled, or what my therapist says I do. I made my feelings my reality, which is to say that, like, I thought I'd done something wrong. Like, I thought I'd mucked them all up. I thought I'd done a really bad job. I thought I was terrible at what I did. And suddenly I was looking up loads of vocational courses thinking, what would be useful? But again, define youth. And so I started thinking about all of those things about being an artist, where you feel like you failed at something, or you get a rejection, or you feel like you don't belong in a room. Like, I don't even feel like I deserve to be up here doing this talk to you. And all of these things are things that we all experience at all stages of our careers as artists. And they can all feel really negative, and they can really feel like, for me, they always make me feel like I've done something wrong. But actually, we can learn stuff from them. So I'm basically just going to talk through some of the stuff that I've thought about when I've been knocked back, and hopefully by the end of this talk you'll go, yeah, I'm going to go and make some stuff now. Just the caveat to this is, I know we all have varying degrees and markers of success and various privileges and accesses, but the point is, the crap bits of being an artist are probably they still affect us all the same, no matter where we are in our careers. So I'm going to start off by telling you about a book. I had an idea for a book that was definitely going to win the Booker Prize. It was amazing. It was a thriller, but it was literary, the best thing that the Booker Prize people love. It's genre, but it's smart. And it was brilliant. I had like a compelling character. I had all these big ideas that I was going to discuss. I had this very interesting setting. I had lots of like American history. And I sat down to write it, and I thought, because this is the Booker book, I better do the opposite of what I usually do. Because if I'm going to win the Booker, I better plan this book properly. So I wrote a really intricate plan. Like, I planned out everything that was going to happen. I drew schematics of this place. It was set in a hotel. I had schematics of the hotel. I was researching what different staff members, what their roles were. I was like looking up times that it takes for elevators to go up and down certain steps of floors. I had, every chapter moved into the next chapter, and it was tauter and tauter and tauter. It was brilliant. And then I tried to write it, and I just overplanned it. And in over-planning it, I just completely flattened any excitement I had about the idea. And I thought, well, if I'm not excited about it, the Booker guys are definitely not going to be excited about it. And so I never wrote the book. Like, the plan is still, and those schematics are still on my hard drive, and I probably will never go back to it. And it's a shame, because I'd really like to win the Booker. But there was just something about the over-planning that just sort of made I just lost any inspiration I had. There's planning, and there's structure, and there's instinct. I'd whittled away my instinct. I'd whittled away my confidence on it. And so it just sits there. And I could take from that, oh, you're never going to win the Booker, you're a piece of shit, which is what I tend to do. But actually, in the planning of it, I learned something about structure, and I've sort of intuited something about how to move plot forward. By over planning something on paper, I now know how to just do it in my head, where the instinct resides. And so maybe it wasn't a waste of time. Maybe it's made the future drafts that we'll do of things easier to come together. There's another time, 3 years ago, where I was in Burbank in America, somewhere. This is why I didn't get this job that I'm about to tell you. I don't even know where it was. I would have not shown up to work. I was basically at Marvel Studios to work on one of their TV shows. And I was like, I'd waited in the waiting room. Again, I signed an NDA, which I'm now breaking, but whoops. I was sitting behind the original Iron Man costume from the first Iron Man, and the Infinity Gauntlet was there, and I was losing my shit. I even took a couple of photographs and definitely sent them to everyone I know. Again, breaking my NDA. And then I went into this room to talk about this project. I can't say which show it was. That I will retain my my NDA on. And I sat down and about 3 minutes into the conversation, I realised that they were talking to me about show running the show. And I immediately freaked out. And I was like, I've never show run a show in my life. I don't even think I know what that means. So I immediately just said, look, I don't think I'm good enough to show run the show, but I will be the best writer you will ever have. And then I started naming other writers that would be better than me to show run the show. And then after 20 minutes of me just telling them names and them writing them down, they went, thanks very much for coming in. And that was the last I heard from them. And that was my dream job. And what I learned about that was I forgot that I deserved to be in that room. I forgot that, like, it's quite a big thing for your agent to have an agent in America, and that agent email Mr. Marvel at marvel.com and go, hey, do you want to talk to this guy about writing a show? And they put me in that room, and I didn't feel like I belonged there. And I feel like that, you know, I know that's like a very sort of name-dropping version of the story that we've all felt, but like sometimes the stakes are really, really high because you have the opportunity of working on this massive thing. But also sometimes the stakes are, I don't feel like I can go to that networking event. But the thing is, I was invited into that room, you were invited to that networking event, or whatever it is. You know, sometimes I don't feel like I deserve that invitation, and that can feel really, really hard because the invitation wouldn't have come my way in the first place if I didn't deserve to be there. And the third thing I wanted to tell you, actually no, I'm just going to move on. But like, all of these things that kind of come our way as artists, like rejection, feeling like we failed on a project, not feeling like we belong in a room, they're all kind of inevitable. So I feel like there are ways we can kind of think about what that is telling us, or what our bodies, what our minds are trying to tell us about the experience. You know, the idea of failure, I'm going to come back to failure in a second, but in a little bit, because I think failure is often where other voices enter the fray and you forget what your intentions were in the first place. And I'm going to do a little exercise with you guys in a bit about setting intentions for the projects that you want to work on. But the thing I've had to learn about rejection is very rarely about you. It's very rarely about the work that you've done. It's definitely very rarely about you as a person. But it's very easy to kind of take a rejection and go, this must mean that the thing that I'm working on is terrible because I'm a terrible person. Again, as my therapist says, I make my feelings my reality. And it's often not about you. Like, has anyone had a rejection that has the words, we were hoping to see, or what we were looking for was? That often tells you something about that rejection. But it's not about you. It's about what they were looking for. That doesn't necessarily match up with the thing that you were trying to do. So the questions that I try and ask myself whenever a project of mine has been knocked back is, what of this rejection is about me and what I think about myself? What am I projecting onto this rejection? Why is this rejection making me feel bad? Is it because I really want this to happen and now it just feels harder to make it happen? Is it because I didn't do it right? Is it because my intentions are off? But, you know, I've done enough stuff to know that I know what I want to make, you know? Like, I don't think at this point in my career I'm going to go off and do something that other people want me to do, because that doesn't necessarily match with what I want to achieve as an artist. So, like, I have to ask myself, what am I projecting onto this rejection? And then the other question I think it's important to ask myself is, what information do I not have? Is the source giving me this rejection dependable? Do I know what their needs are? Do I know what they're looking for, and does it match with what I want to do? And then the other thing about a rejection is sometimes you get a really useful rejection. Has anyone had a useful rejection? Like, a useful rejection for me is where they go, this is what I would like to see, what I would have liked to have seen. Like, I've had like book projects or film projects knocked back where people have gone into detail about what they didn't think was working. And that's quite useful because that helps you to stress test your idea. It might make you go, do I agree with their notes? Well, if I disagree with their notes, would I want to work with them? Like, would they be the right person for this? I often think that, like, working as an artist, trying to get work made, whether it's like finding an editor or finding a producer to work on the film stuff or the book stuff that I'm doing, often I think it's a question of just finding the right person who gets you and gets what you want to do. And not everyone is necessarily going to get you and get what you want to do. So, but sometimes people might give you feedback that kind of makes you go, is this what I'm trying to do? Oh, and I've had notes in the past where the feedback has made me realise that what's in my head is not how it's actually been executed. And often the problem lies in the execution. And maybe I need to go back and see how I'm executing it. Is the thing that I'm trying to do coming across? Because intentions are great, but the execution is where people get to understand what you're trying to do in the first place. So maybe you need to think about how you're executing your idea. Do they get what you're trying to do? So yeah, like often a rejection can be helpful in some way. And the other thing about rejection and where projects have failed to land is like, I have I don't know if people may not agree with me about this, but I think all creative stuff is subjective. And I know what I like, and I don't necessarily know what a TV commissioner might like, or what an editor might like. And so everything comes down to people's subjective expertise in some way. But I teach creative writing, and one of the exercises that I get people to do is I show them a photograph on the screen of a room, and I get them to write down 10 specific things that they notice about the room. And the amazing thing is, where people tend to write down completely different things. They might note the same object, but they might describe it differently. They might not even see the object. They might just note down the vibe. But the specificity with which people note things down tells you everything you need to know about what they notice, what they like, what they are like, what their socioeconomic factors are, what sort of person they are, what we notice. Like, well, you know, it's so subjective what everyone notices in this photograph and the way they describe it, the words they use to describe it. You know, it's usually a kitchen, and it's a kitchen that has an Aga in it, and someone who's from a quite a posh background might go, that's an Aga, and I might go, that's a big oven where you can't see the thing that you're cooking. How do you know that your souffle is soufed? I don't know. But that's because I didn't see an Aga until my late 20s. I still couldn't tell you what an Aga is. Just know that it's fancy. It's never off, is that right? Cost of living crisis, guys. So yeah, like, but when we think about that subjectivity, we then have to apply it to our audience. Like, you know, I have to think about who my readers are, and my readers don't necessarily experience my work objectively. They experience things based on their lived experience, their socioeconomic factors, what they like, what they are like, what mood they're in when they're reading the work. You know, all of these things contribute to a reader's experience of my work. And I can't control any of that. I can't control any of those factors. That's how you have situations where someone reads a book and they go, oh my God, this book changed my life. Read this, it changed my life. And then you read it and you're like, yeah, it was all right. But maybe they read it at the right time in their life and it just wasn't that book for you. And you thought it was fine, but you just didn't have that visceral reaction to it. And that may be down to a whole heap of things. To kind of give you an example of this, I've judged loads and loads of short story competitions in my time as a writer. Has anyone entered a short story competition? I'm going to tell you how they work, okay? So say a short story competition is open for 2 months, and you have like 5,000 entries and 3 judges. Those 3 judges don't read all 5,000 entries. The people who are judging the competition, they employ sifters who sift out what they think is the good stuff from what they think is the bad stuff. Now, these sifters aren't just anyone, they are people with some sort of literary background, but again, they have their subjective taste of what they consider good and what they consider bad. So And so by the time the judges read the 50 best stories of the 5,000 submitted, you've already cut out 4,950. This isn't, maybe I should have learned maths till I was 18 years old. How's it going to be funded, Rishi? I don't know. Sorry, this is not a political space. Just for a second, I do think that there are a lot of people ideologically opposed to learning maths till you're 18 because they hated learning maths at school. And that's not the same as, how's this going to be funded, man? Teachers already over capacity, man. Those are the issues, not my maths teacher was really mean to me because I didn't know the answer to that algebra equation. Again, I'm projecting. Sorry, this isn't a political space. But so yeah, like by the time we as the judges read those short stories, we were reading like, again, maths, what's the percentage? 10% of what was entered? 1% of what was entered, which is like hardly anything. And then we as the judges, we have to decide what we think are the 10 best stories and the one winner. And we're all people with different opinions. And I've judged enough competitions to know that usually it's everyone's second favourite story that wins. Which is like, so like to win is great. And if you ever have won a short story competition, not only was your short story amazing, but also you got through a lot of hurdles to even get seen by the judges. So like when we know all of this stuff, when we know that like, and it's the same with funding applications. Funding applications are read by like, a team of funders who have an awareness of the arts world, but they may not have like, say, literature expertise or theatre expertise, and you're applying for a theatre grant or a literature grant. And so you're already not sending your stuff to a warm audience. There's so many hurdles to get through. So it can never really be about you, really, can it? And I think that's an important thing to remember. Because, where are we? All of this is infuriating. I understand that, and I know that, and I have been at the other end of it as well. But it's more of an institutional question than an individual artist question. But I know that as an artist, when you get that rejection, I'm sorry to inform you that your short story did not make the long list this year, but check back next year, or whatever it is. It was a very difficult decision, but the judges had to make some hard choices. It's very easy to take that and go, oh my God, I am terrible. Maybe I should not bother. But there are loads and loads of other short story competitions out there and different hurdles and hoops to jump through. But the main thing is like, instead of thinking it's about you, maybe we should go, well, actually, if those judges are being paid £1,000 to judge that short story, maybe they should read all 5,000 of them. But also, like, I know as a judge, having read those short stories, there were times, like, the first 5 I'd read, I'd be really, really generous to. And then I'd start to worry that I was running out of time. And then the next batch I'd read through really quickly and be harsher about because you've only got a certain number of slots to fill. And then when you get to the end, you're just sort of like trying to get through everything quickly because you're running late. Again, like I'm not necessarily reading it with the time and space that I should have to read all of this stuff. So again, it's not about you. But so like to kind of break this into what you can actually take from this. This isn't a cheeky plug for a book, what I wrote, but also it kind of is. I wrote, but I was starting to write down notes on like how to set your intentions, but I already wrote them in the book, so I'm just going to read them out from the book, if that's okay. I'll tell you what, I'll make it such an uncheeky plug, I won't even show you the cover of the book. So when I'm trying to set my intentions on a piece of work, I try and think about like why I want to do this in the first place. Like why commit time to creating something? Like what's it going to give me? And so I like to ask myself 4 questions. Why this? Why me? Why now? Who is it for? And I find all 4 of those questions really, really helpful. They help me through the hard times, the slow times, the I can't make this goddamn scene work times, the inevitable rejection times. And the thing is, you don't always know your intentions when you go into a thing. Sometimes you just go in with vibes, and that's cool. But by the time you get to the end of the project, you should have an idea of why you're doing it in this way, why you're the best person to tell this story, why you're telling this now, and who it's for. So just to break it down a bit, why this? This piece of work could have been a poem, a tweet, a conversation, a film, a stray thought, a journal entry, an Instagram caption, a novel, a screenplay, a short story, a play, a painting. Why this? Why this story? And why tell it in the form you've chosen? What are your reasons for choosing to write it, a personal essay or narrative non-fiction? Or what is it about this story that requires a novel-length interrogation? Why do these characters need 300 pages of obstacles? Why? Why does this story demand that you tell it? Write down why you're choosing the form you're choosing. Why a novel? Why not another form? Why a short story? Why a screenplay? Make sure that the form fits the story. Is this a very interior story? Is this a very visual story? Is this a story that requires lots of players, or is this a story that requires a single voice? But always think about the form that you're choosing. Because, as artists with multiple disciplines, like I'm often thinking, is this a novel? Is this an idea for a TV show? Like, I started working on a film idea, and it sort of pivoted into a novel idea. But I started writing the novel, and I realised actually it's a short story, and it's because I didn't really think about the way I wanted to tell the story until the end. And sometimes knowing what the story is, who the characters are, what kind of arc you want to put them through, that can help you to understand the form that you want to put it into. There's also a question of who it's for, which also informs the form that you choose, but I'll get to that in a second. Why me? Why do you need to write this, or why do you need to work on this piece of art? I know I'm a writer, therefore all my frames of reference are writing. If you don't write it, will anyone else? Will it stretch you? Will it stretch culture? Will it stretch literature? Will it stretch the world? Do you bring a particular expertise or worldview? Is this something that happened to you? Is this something that's happening in the world right now and your unique take hasn't been explored yet? I often think there are so many stories about love. There's so many films, there's so many songs, there's so many plays about love. Why do we get to write about love again and again and again? It's because everyone has their own unique experience of love, or an absence of love, or their own unique experience of heartbreak. And it's that unique experience, that unique worldview, that unique thing that only you can tell, that informs why you're the best person to tell this story. The trick with why me is to not grandstand. Sometimes a story needs to be told, because if you don't do it now, you won't ever do it, and then the story won't exist, and that will give you the sads. And I've definitely had that in my career, where I've sat on something for so long that it just never got done, and now I'm sad that it doesn't exist. My friend Josie Long, the amazing stand-up comedian and writer, she had this badge that she was giving out on her tour that I have a blue tacked above my desk at home, and it says, sometimes if you want something beautiful to exist, you have to make it for yourself. And I like to take that into the stuff that I'm making. You need it. Sometimes a story needs to be told because you needed to find that story at a particular time in your life, and this is your opportunity to rectify the past absence by ensuring no one else feels that absence as well. Sometimes a story needs to exist because no one else will write it, and that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be told. Sometimes a story exists because you need to write it out of your system. Sometimes you write this story because others can't. They don't have the tools, the time, or the presence of mind to do it. Sometimes you bear witness. There's a quote from Arundhati Roy: there's really no such thing as the voiceless. There's only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. So write that story. Why now? Some stories require distance, some stories require closeness. Hindsight and reflection can radically alter stories. Being in the moment of a story, still living in it, in its consequences, in its fallout, can affect a story. So what is it about now that's compelling you to tell this story? Is it to do with the world? Is it you? Is it now? Is there a conversation happening right now? Is the simple answer, it's now or never? Who's it for? Stories need readers. Who is the reader? Define them, tease out what you know about them. This isn't for the faceless masses, this is for someone specific. Identify your reader, write about who they are, why they need this book, and what you hope they'll get from it. Sometimes the reader is you, some time ago, and that's more of enough of a reason to do it. So I find that, like, though if I work on those intentions before I put pen to paper, I have a very clear idea of what I want to do. And it's often my North Star when I'm floundering, or when I don't know what to do next, or when I'm stuck, or when I have the dreaded writer's block. And often reminding myself of my intentions in the first place can be really, really powerful. But the thing is, intentions evolve, especially who it's for. Sometimes you don't necessarily know who it's for until you start writing it, and the answer starts to become clear to you. And that is okay as well. So, like, think about these intentions as fluid. They can change. They don't have to be stuck in a point. The final thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to read you a short bit about the inner critic and imposter syndrome. If you bear with me a second. Page 104. So, where are we? So the inner critic does anyone know what I mean by the inner critic? Is that voice sort of inside you just going, this is rubbish, or someone else wrote this book, but better version of this book, or yeah, this is never going to get made. You know, it's that voice that's sort of gnawing at you, and it's like your worst fears, but weirdly it's in your, sometimes it's in your own voice, sometimes it's in someone else's voice, but I feel like we all have an inner critic, someone who's always like saying our worst fears back to us, which is sort of annoying, because like one of the things I teach writers is always have in your pocket the worst possible thing that you could tell one of your characters, because then you've got a grenade that can be lobbed at them. Problem is, we always have that grenade within ourselves. So I wrote this chapter about that inner critic. Rather than pretend the inner critic doesn't exist, I want to throw some light on it and admit it's there in the hope that this acknowledgement can help us deal with it. The inner critic never quietens. If you can't hear that inner critic, then we have a problem. That inner critic, that part of you that says you're an imposter, you're not good enough, you'll never write a book as good as X or Y or Z. What's the point? Every word feels like a 5-year-old wrote it. Your plot's more basic than the 1 times table. It never goes away and you don't want it to go away. You need to learn how to be in conversation with it. You need to learn how to respond to it and manage it, because it won't go away. And that's okay. We can live with this little gremlin on our shoulders if we can ensure it's pushing us to do our work better, rather than stopping us from doing the thing that we're supposed to be doing. The thing about inner critics is we always give an outsider's perspective. We compare ourselves unfavourably to writers who have, for all intents and purposes, you know, whenever I've been working on a first draft of something and then I read someone else's work and I'm like, damn, they did it so well. But it's been edited by an agent and an editor and a copy editor and a junior editor and a proofreader, and it's been published. So how do we, so yeah, there are ways you can use your inner critic to your advantage. So 1, your inner critic cannot make you as good as any other artist. It can only make you the best you. You don't want to be as good as another writer, you want to be the best you. It can't improve productivity if you focus on what's bad. Frame the things your inner critic tells you as what's good and what could be better. Work on strategies to make what needs to be better, and what's good, brilliant. Your inner critic can be paralyzing. I've seen it in creative writing workshops where writers consider giving up as a result of receiving feedback from someone that echoes the worst things their inner critic already tells them about themselves. If you already know what you need to work on, then focus on it, spend time with it. If your inner critic says your characters lack depth, spend time developing them. If it says your plot is contrived, try addressing that. Your inner critic is not you. It's a self-defense mechanism kicking in. Writing is precious, and it makes us vulnerable. We're bleeding on the page. Of course, there's going to be some survival instinct kicking into demand. We not do this, lest people read it, and our most private confessional thoughts be held up to the scrutiny of others. If we're to accept that our inner critic is not us, then we need to remind ourselves that we're not writing for our inner critic or for a scrutinous readership. We're writing for a version of ourselves that needed to read this book. Celebrate your accomplishments. Your writing, there's something to celebrate. If we know what our goal is, what our intentions are, accept that this is a vulnerable process, accept that we will have critical thoughts about our own work, and know that this will impact our work, our mental state, and the way we treat our bodies. And if all that is true, remember to step outside yourself, take time away from the work, be in the world, and remember the thing that made you sit down in the first place and bare your soul. All sounds very easy, I know. So in conclusion, you're great. 2023, last year is another place. This year is all about doing the thing that you need to do. What I like to have, as well as like all the stuff I'm currently being commissioned to work on, whether it's like TV shows that are in development or a Spider-Man comic, thank you Martin, May 2023, writing a Spider-Man comic, or like a book idea that I'm working on. I always like to have a really personal project that no one knows about, that I keep close to my chest. And that's always the thing I bounce to when all the other work gets hard, because I know that that is precious and it's emergent, and I can allow it to be flexible and iterative, and it is mine and mine only to hold. Also, all of that rejection, all of that perceived failure, all of that imposter syndrome, it's not your fault. And finally, set your intentions and allow them to evolve. And that's it, really. So usually there's like a Q&A part, but if people start asking me questions and heralding me as like an expert on failure, that is going to be like my inner critic has become like 30 odd people in front of me. So I don't know how we want to do this. If people do want to have, like, look, if this is a first for Q&As. If it's more of a comment and less of a question, feel free to, thanks. That was Danielle's suggestion, I say that. Feel free to reflect on some of your own work. We've got 25 minutes.